Going through multiple rounds of interviews at a commercial real estate firm can be an extremely long and drawn out process, but for most analyst and associate roles in the industry, you're not out of the woods yet until you've gone through a modeling exam. And a modeling exam is exactly what it sounds like, testing your knowledge of Excel in real estate finance. And to prepare for a modeling exam, priority number one is obviously to tighten up your Excel and real estate financial modeling skill sets. However, I also find that a lot of people tend to miss the forest for the trees here during exam prep, and aside from just focusing on general technical training, there are also a few main principles that can really help during this process and can set you apart from other applicants who also have made it to this stage. So in case you have a modeling assessment coming up, or you just want to make sure you're prepared for something that will very likely be thrown your way when interviewing for commercial real estate roles, in this video, let's walk through 3 of my biggest pieces of advice for succeeding in a real estate financial modeling interview exam and how to maximize your chances of landing an offer. So to step back at a high level, a modeling exam is really just a way for an employer to test drive your skills and to see what kind of work product you can produce when operating under pressure or under tight deadlines. And regardless of what kind of time constraints are put on you in every part of the commercial real estate industry, there is a tremendous amount of focus on the appearance of the documents sent out to investors, lenders, and partners, which leads me to my first piece of advice, which is to pay extreme attention to detail in all work you submit. As the analyst on a project, even though you're going to be getting some oversight from your managers directly, at the end of the day, you are going to be the one responsible for putting together the investment pitch and the financials that tell the story of a deal. And this is true for all parts of the business, since investment sales analysts are the ones putting together BOVs and offering memorandums, acquisitions analysts are responsible for putting together equity memos and investment committee presentations, and within lending firms, the analysts are going to be the ones responsible for creating the materials to get approval internally to lend on a property. And in a real estate analyst or associate role, you'll also usually be supporting a manager or director who's going to be the one presenting this information to the client or senior leadership, meaning that your work is inevitably going to reflect on their abilities, whether they like it or not. And with that, to show that you are the best fit to represent both the individual that you'll be working for and the company as a whole, during an exam, make sure to take the time to read and follow all instructions carefully, double check your spelling and grammar in any written materials you'll be submitting, and make sure your model formatting is clean, organized, and easy to follow for a manager, investor, client, or lender. Real estate investment and brokerage firms tend to operate very similarly to investment banking or general private equity firms in that something as small as a simple spelling error can be a really big deal if it makes it to a client's desk. So the more you can show yourself as someone who pays attention to detail up front and takes pride in submitting clean, concise, and accurate work, the more likely it's going to be that the company is going to want to bring you on board. Now, aside from just the visual side of things, even though most employers aren't necessarily going to expect you to get every single question right on the exam, they will want to make sure that no matter what, your model and conclusions make sense directionally, which leads me to my next recommendation, which is to make sure to gut check all of your numbers before submitting your work. On timed exams, because there's so much pressure leading up to this point, people often start to panic as they're getting closer to the end of the test, and when that happens, it can be extremely easy to forget to step back and make sure that the numbers you're submitting actually make sense at a high level. Especially with the way a dynamic real estate financial model works, one mistype in a formula or one extra zero in a manual input is going to affect the entire model as a whole. So zooming out and making sure the numbers make sense before submitting your work is a smart and really a necessary step to make it through this stage successfully. So to put this in more concrete terms, this involves making sure that the rent values being calculated each month roughly line up with the in-place rent roll, making sure that expense reimbursements are being factored in on commercial leases if applicable, and just doing an overall NOI estimate based on current income and historical expenses to double check the cash flows that your model is spitting out. Ultimately, employers want to make sure there is reasoning and thought behind the work you submit, and as the garbage in, garbage out saying goes, there isn't much value in an analyst that doesn't actually analyze the models they're creating, and that person isn't very likely to make it past this stage. Now, if you pay attention to detail and gut check your work, you're going to have the vast majority of your bases covered on a technical exam. However, the prompts and the assumptions you're given on these assessments aren't always perfectly clear, which can lead to some ambiguity as far as how to answer certain questions or how to model a given scenario. And with that, my third and final piece of advice when working through a commercial real estate interview exam is that if something is unclear, explain your assumptions and explain why you decided to build your model in the way that you did. Again, most firms are just looking to test your thought process on an exam rather than expecting you to get every single question on the test correct, and they want to see the way that you think through complex sets of information and then how you present that information on paper. And with that, if you're taking a guess on what the exam is asking for regarding the final product or on an assumption you should be making, you'll want to make sure to include your assumption around this in your Excel file with a comment in the specific cell related to the assumption. So for example, if you're given information on an acquisition loan with an interest rate, but there's no information to be found on an amortization period, you might assume that the loan is full-term interest only, and you want to add that assumption clearly in your work. Or for example, you might be given an assumption around market rate tenant improvement allowances today and asked to calculate what tenant improvement allowances will be in the future, and you'll need to make an assumption around TI inflation going forward and note that directly in your work. In many cases, companies will actually provide vague assumptions or prompts intentionally to see how you deal with incomplete information and what kinds of conclusions you'll draw without all the answers provided. In a general sense, you can think of a modeling test similar to a tryout for a high school basketball team where you and a bunch of other candidates are going to be taking the court together, all trying to make the roster. And while it's easy to say, I'm good at basketball and I've played a lot before, a tryout gives a coaching staff a true sense of how you can actually play the game and how you would fit into the group as a whole. And in that scenario, a coach wouldn't expect you to shoot 100% from the field and never turn the ball over, but they would want to see a high basketball IQ, strong fundamentals, good court awareness, and a general understanding of the rules of the game. And to bring things back to a real estate context, if you can focus on attention to detail, use common sense to gut check your numbers at a high level, and explain any assumptions that you've made that weren't clear on the exam, assuming you have the fundamentals mastered, you will put yourself in a great position to get yourself to the finish line and land the role that you're targeting. And if you want to make sure that you do have those fundamentals mastered before heading into the interview process, and you want to work through some practice problems and case studies to tighten up your skill set in Excel, make sure to check out our all-in-one membership training platform, Breaking a CRE Academy. A membership to the Academy will give you instant access to over 120 hours of video training on real estate financial modeling and analysis. You'll get access to hundreds of practice Excel interview exam questions, sample acquisition case studies, and you'll also get access to the Break into CRE Analyst Certification Exam, which covers topics like real estate pro forma and development modeling, commercial real estate lease modeling, equity waterfall modeling, and many other real estate financial analysis concepts that will help you prove to employers that you have what it takes to tackle the responsibilities of an analyst or associate at a top real estate firm. And if you like this video and want to see more videos on real estate interview exam topics, make sure to hit the like button to let me know, and let me know in the comments any other interview topics you'd like to see covered in a future video on the channel. As always, thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you found this helpful. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already to see more videos like this every single week, and I'll see you in the next video.